Hello and welcome to the third class in consumer behaviour. This chapter is about motivation of consumers and the personality of consumers. We'll open up with a very simple example of what some people do in marketing, which is to personify a brand. That is to say, they create a character, a cartoon character, or a real person actually represents the brand. So we've got some examples there. You might know some of these. At the left, the Pillsbury Doughboy. This is a very old American personification. Underneath, the three characters from Rice Krispies, Snap, Crackle and Pop. And then the tiger, Tony, from Frosties. We have the Michelin Man. And then a newer one, Mr. Muscle, which in some countries is personified as a real person. And that helps to give the brand an actual personality. So we can see with the three cartoon characters, Snap, Crackle and Pop, that they're young, mischievous elves, and that if you eat that breakfast cereal, you'll become very lively like them. Or that if you eat Frosties, you'll become a great roaring tiger like Tony the Tiger. So this chapter, we have to look at what is it that motivates customers and what are their needs, what are their goals, and can we actually do anything to shape their actual behaviour. So people act on motivations, and we'll see later on with a diagram that at the bottom of this motivation are people's actual needs, things that they actually can't live without, moving up towards the top of the triangle, towards things that actually just make them happy. And so we're motivated to actually buy things because some things are very simple, such as water, shelter, food, clothes, moving upwards, to having luxury apartments or supercars. So the goals, they're the things that we're actually looking for in life. And so, for instance, we might want a Lamborghini, we can't afford one, and so we buy some Lamborghini perfume to actually make us happy. So all of human behaviour is apparently goal-orientated. So let's look at more detail about needs and goals of human beings. So our needs are physiological, such as air to breathe, water to drink, and psychological, the things that we've learned from other people. So our physiological needs, they're the things, as I said, food, water, air, and clothes and shelter. And then the psychological needs are things that we learn at a young age from parents, from school, from being with other people. And we want things that are going to get us affection or power, or we learn something, or we gain some achievement. So goals are what we're working towards, and these can be very generic, average goals, or they can be very product specific. So generic goals that will satisfy our physiological or our psychological needs, and then product specific goals so a generic goal would be, I need a new pair of jeans, but a product specific goal is that I want a pair of, in this example, Calvin Klein jeans or whatever. Or if it's a car, like somebody saying, oh, I need a new car. But then to be product specific, people say, well, I actually need a new Ferrari. So how do these needs come about? By internal stimulus. So we know when we're feeling thirsty or when we're feeling hungry, emotional things, like some people are emotional eaters, they get upset, they eat, it makes them feel good. Or from external stimulus. So for instance, people say it's not a good idea to go shopping when you're hungry because your body's experienced so many internal stimuli from actually being hungry that as you walk around the supermarket shelves, you'll pick up a lot more things that possibly you didn't need just because the stimulus is there to make you want it. And then the goals that we select, they're very much based on our life experience and what we know, and these are different in different parts of the world. So for example, China is coming out of communism, and so people are feeling that they actually want to move on and buy a nice family car, whereas people in the West already have cars, and so their goals are to actually move up and buy a more decorative car or whatever. And so this also then fits in with culture. And so we see, like in the Mediterranean, people are a bit more showy off, and they like lots of gold jewellery, fancy clothes, and very fancy cars. Whereas if you go to Northern Europe, things are a lot more plainer and a lot more generic. Or say, for instance, in Australia, people don't crave to have BMWs and Ferraris. They like Jeeps and they like pickups and they like to go to the beach. So it's the values of your culture will actually change your goals in life as well. Like, so in some cultures, the goal is to be extremely rich, whereas in other cultures, people are brought up to believe just to be happy is enough. And, you know, to be super rich is actually a sin. So, needs are aroused by internal stimuli. So, as I said, like feeling hungry, feeling thirsty, feeling really hot, feeling sunburn, listening to certain music could set you off. And then the goals are what you're actually craving for, what you're actually specifically wanting. So what we actually need is never satisfied. So you might feel thirsty and you have a drink, but tomorrow you'll also need more liquid in your body, or you need more food in your body. And so new needs come through as we actually satisfy the ones that we've got now. And then our goals change through life. So if you've been very successful, the type of car that you're aiming to buy might actually change through life. Or as you change jobs, the type of clothes that you want to buy might actually change through life. So things that go wrong is that customers actually feel frustration, and they have mechanisms, defense mechanisms, to help them handle that actual frustration that they're feeling. So we can see that people have the defense mechanisms of perhaps aggression or rationalization, regression, withdrawal, projection, daydreaming, identification, and repressiveness. So people go through one or more of these feelings because they can't actually achieve their goals. So there's some basic psychological theory that shows us in consumer behavior, what is it about people? So what do they actually need? So some people need to show that they've achieved something. Some people like the shock of the thrill of certain purchases. Some people want to show affiliation, that they belong to some group. Some people want to show their power or their dominance over other people. Some people just like change, you know, the sort of people that travel a lot and like to experience new cultures, new foods, and other people prefer order in their lives. So this is a small text about the psychologist Murray and what he actually found about these personality traits. But what's a lot more famous in business circles is Maslow and this hierarchy of needs. So you see this in many, many business books. I'm sure that you've come across it before, actually. And so it's this idea that there's a pyramid, a triangle, and that we go up through this pyramid, actually satisfying our needs to achieve our goals. And so again, we see at the bottom as physiological needs, because you can't get away from this. Human beings need food, water, air, and shelter, and we've also mentioned your sex. So this might seem very obvious to you, and especially if you come from a Western country, these are things that people take for granted. But of course, there are some places in the world, unfortunately, right now, where people don't have food, or they don't have clean water, or they haven't got clean air, or that there is no shelter to live in. Okay? So, you know, don't just think about yourself in these instances. Remember that, you know, in other cultures and other parts of the world, these physiological needs are not so obvious. And the second level, you might think, well, this is a bit obvious, you know, this has nothing to do with me, because it talks about being safe, having order in life, having stability. But of course, again, because of different wars and different civil wars, there are many people in the world where this second level also is not met. And it's only after these things are met that people will actually start to bring other things into their life, because those first two levels are fundamental for humans to get by. So after that, people might start looking towards their social group for friendship, or to show that they belong to something. And then only after that will they actually start to feel that they need to show their status in life, that they need to fuel their self-esteem, or they want something prestigious. And then at the very top of the pyramid is this idea of self-fulfillment, that people actually reach their destination, they reach their final goal, and they become very happy with their lives. And so again, this is a text actually describing more detail what Maslow has to say. So people like to show power. I don't know whether this is a particularly Western thing. People also need to show affiliation, that they belong to some group, whether that's a large general group or a small subgroup. And they also want to show other people that they are achieving in life. And I suppose at the moment, through the use of social media, people are actually showing these things very clearly to the other people in their social group. So how can we identify the motives that people have, and can we actually measure these motives? So they're a bit intangible motives, aren't they? And they're not something that you can actually touch. They're something that we can talk about, but we can't actually finalize them, as it were. So what researchers do is they use a lot of surveys and try to get people to answer questionnaires to try and find out something about people's personality and what their motives actually are. And another way is to actually do focus groups where they bring people together. So how do we actually measure these motives? So a lot of it is qualitative research, where we might actually be listening to people talking in focus groups, or more quantitative, where we actually get people to tick boxes. So we might get somebody to tell us a story. Why did they go to the supermarket today? Why did they visit that part of the supermarket? Why did they take those things off the shelves? Why did they put them back? Why did they buy them? An old psychology method is like word association. So you might throw a word into the air and see what sort of reply that you actually get. Or you get people to sort through photos. A more modern way, sort of online surveys, you get people to place themselves on a sofa next to the product or the surface. How close do you actually feel to that product? If it was a friend, how good a friend would it be, and things like that. So Ernest Dichter, based on Freud, actually trying to interpret these different types of personalities and what drives people to actually want things. So this part of consumer behaviour, as you can see, has a lot of psychology in it, and we actually look at people's personalities. What is it, there's specific qualities about people, their attributes, their personality traits, different factors in the world and mannerisms that they have, what makes people different from each other, and how we can figure out what they actually might want to do. So again, as I said, looking at psychology theory, so some people look at Freudian theory, where we look at people that, they have the ego and they have a superego. And then there's other personality theory that's apart from Freud, and then looking at personality trait theory as well. So if you look at Freud, Freud mentions that we have primitive drives, like Maslow, that we've got these psychological and physiological needs. So we have to satisfy our hunger and our thirst. And our superego drives us towards being socially acceptable. And then the ego is the thing that actually monitors our behaviour. And so the idea is that if any of these are out of balance, that what causes people to be strange or mentally ill or whatever. And then outside of Freud, people just look at social relationships and whether we have tension in our lives, whether we feel inferior, are we compliant, are we aggressive people, are we detached? And so, we look at individual people's personalities. So what are the factors that actually motivate people towards actually purchasing something? So we have functional factors, hedonistic factors, social factors, and cognitive factors. And then how innovative, so we look at something that is very generic, or other things that are within a particular category, or innovative behaviour where people actually change and adopt new things. So again, often in an online survey, different companies will ask people about their personality, like when a new product comes out, are you the first to try it? Do you wait for other people to try it? Or are you actually not bothered? And we also look at people's personality, dogmatism, how rigid are people? You know, how likely are you get them to change their minds? Are they inwardly directed, or are they sort of outwardly directed? Do they need to feel that they want to be unique, which again, if we look at Hofstede, you know, is something that's particularly Western, this idea that somebody wants to be very individual. And how highly do they actually want to be stimulated as well? One of the things that I find interested in this chapter is the idea that some people are visualizers and some people are verbalizers, because I learned something about myself with this chapter. And so most people are very visual. We're attracted by the bright colours, or the certain style of a poster, or the way that something is filmed. And as human beings, we home in on colours and style much more quickly than we would actually home in on words. We use visual indicators for danger, such as the colour red, or traffic signs, traffic lights. So we are, as human beings, very, very visual. But also, obviously, you know, we have the power to speak, we have language, and so we have words that we use with adverts as well. And some people actually home in on the words or the cleverness of the actual advert. So, for example, many years ago, Toyota did an advert with the byline, "The car in front is a Toyota," which, of course, most of the time it isn't. But just because you've heard that sentence, when you're out on the road driving, you start noticing Toyota cars. And so it's actually very, very clever verbalization that they created there. So I myself like word puzzles, I like Scrabble and games like that. And so I found that I am much more attractive towards advertisements, promotions that are actually verbal, that have some sort of word game in them. Materialism, again, you know, consumerism, a Western concept where people actually show off the money that they've got by the things that they actually buy, by their car, by their clothes, by their jewellery. Ethnocentrism is, are people willing to buy goods from outside the country or not? So, for example, in the 1960s, Britain wasn't doing very well in manufacturing, and they started a campaign to try to get people to buy British, but they wouldn't, because British cars and British kitchen goods were actually not very well made. The same thing happens in Turkey. People don't like to buy Turkish goods. They prefer to buy German goods that are actually imported into the country, particularly, again, like for kitchen items and for electronic goods. So visualizers, either they're attracted by an actual object or by something specific. So, a discussion question. What is the difference between fixated consumption and compulsive consumption? So, fixated, you might be like this, or you know somebody like this. Those people that like to collect things, like they like to collect stamps, or they like to collect something in particular. So, this is consumerism, because one doesn't satisfy them. They want another one, another one, another one. So, there are people that collect dolls, or they collect coins. They might be newly minted coins, or they could be ancient coins, but they start collecting things and it can get quite out of hand sometimes. Or maybe like be books, all sorts of things. And then another idea is that for some people it's actually compulsive, that they can't control it at all, and they've noticed that they've found a gene that shows that people are more likely to be an alcoholic, a drug taker, or a gambler, and that same gene would actually cause somebody to do too much shopping. So there are people in the world who go to a shopping mall, spend lots of money for the adrenaline, for the endorphins, to actually make them feel good. And we're back now to this sort of idea of brand personification. And so we see the cartoon character or the real person, and we actually think about that brand in terms of some emotions, like what we feel about them. And I think this is the last slide showing us within that personality what sort of things are very important. Is it a character that's sincere? Are they honest? Are they wholesome? Is it something that excites us? Is it something that's competent, where we look upon that person as, or character as being intelligent or successful? Is it sophisticated? Is it rugged? And I think that we can add to those things as well, because the characters that I showed you at the beginning, many of them are actually aimed at children. So they would actually show you, I suppose, within the excitement framework, that these are spirited characters that you think would be actually fun to be with. So researchers are also looking at the way consumers see themselves, how they would like to be seen, how other people see them, and what that might be in an ideal world. So this could be, are you the best dressed person at work, like with the symbols? Do people actually know how important you are because you have very rare works of art on the walls? Somebody's so successful that they have enough money to set up trust funds so that something will live on after their death. And then, is there vanity involved? Like people who use too many beauty products, or they spend too much time at salons and things like that. Okay, that's the end. So that was about consumers' motivation and their personalities. Okay.